Hey guys, Rick here, back at the workbench. Gonna try and finish up this panel that I started a few weeks back. I had to take some time off to do some other things around here. I got my office and all set up, and the new workbench is now in place. A whole bunch of changes going on, and all for the better. All good stuff. I'm loving it, loving it. So there seemed to be a little confusion in my last video. A lot of people couldn't understand my wiring and what was being wired as far as the buttons and the LEDs. And I know the panel is a mess in the back, so I'm going to try and go through that before I make any changes to see if I can clear that up for everyone, so that maybe if you guys wanted to reproduce it, or whatever the case may be, just want to clear up the confusion. So let me get you down to the workbench and we'll see if we can get all that done. Hey guys, Rick here with a real quick tipster from the Rickster. I just got my new workbench set up, and before, when I had it in the other room, in the train room, I ran into this problem where I would have a camera set up. If you've seen my previous videos, I use this really small camera on a tripod, and I would set it up looking down at the workbench, but I could never see like what the camera is looking at, so I could never tell what the view is, and I would often be going like this, trying to get over top to see the camera view, and it was just a mess. So then I had a brain fart. So let me flip you around here, and I'll show you this real quick, simple, easy tip. All right, so here I am at my new workbench in the basement. Here's my work surface, and here's that little camera that I was telling you about. Now, again, if I'm viewing something down here, it's hard to get up here and look behind there to see, what's on the camera or what's being viewed. So a couple years ago, I had a project where I was putting in a new outlet in one of the bedrooms, and I needed to see inside the hole where I was putting the outlet so I could find the wire that I was feeding down. So I just went to Home Depot and I bought this little handy dandy mirror, and it allows me to see in that hole and behind whatever was in there where I could find the wire. And I thought, hey, if I could just take that, put that behind the camera, and now without having to move the camera, I could see what the camera's looking at, and then I could start my video without having to touch it or lose the frame. So there you go. Quick, easy tip. Use a mirror to look at your viewing space on your camera. It works with cell phones too. I'm not sure about all cell phones, but most cell phones these days, the front view camera isn't as strong as the back view camera. So often, if I'm using my camera to shoot a video, it's usually with the back. So I'll have my phone mounted on the tripod, but I can't see the screen because I'm using the back of the camera. Same concept. I can use the mirror, look at the phone from behind the mirror, and there you go. I get my shot every time. So hope that helps, guys. All right, guys, so here's the back of the panel. I know there's a lot going on, but let me try and separate it for you. Pay attention to only the black line and the colored lines. These are the buttons. What happens is every button has to go back to the NCE mini panel. The only function of that button is to create a short. It would be the same as if I connected these two wires. To create a short to tell the mini panel that, hey, something just happened, run this command. So what I did was I connected a black wire to one side of every button, and then that black wire trails off and goes to one of the ground pins that's on the mini panel. So every button is now grounded. All of these colored wires that you see here are all connecting each button on its own wire, going back to the mini panel on its own input, so that this way, when I close this connection by closing the button, that input going down that green wire then tells the mini panel, hey,
A short was just made, run this command, which in this case, that command is throw a turnout. Okay, that being said, now let's wipe the board, ignore the black wires, ignore the color wires, pay attention to all the silver wires. What you see underneath of all that are all of the LEDs. Underneath of each LED on the opposite side of every button, there are two LEDs. Each LED has its own resistor. What I did is I put a piece of rail on each side of the panel to use as a power source. I've connected those two rails by a wire on the side. So now all I have to do is create a positive connection from my 12 volt power supply onto one of these rails, doesn't matter which one because they're connected. So 12 volts positive is going to go into these two rails. That's going to put positive power to all of the LEDs. Now, all of the negative lines on each LED are hooked together so that when these two lights get positive power, the negative lead will come off of here. That's where I now have to take another colored cable and connect two wires to each side so that one side will light up red, one side will light up green. This way, the dual LEDs that are in there will light up depending on which side gets the negative connection. Let me show you for an example. All right, guys, what I have here is a standard 9 volt battery. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the positive lead to there, and I'm going to connect that line to the rail. Now, if I take the negative terminal and connect that to the 9 volt battery, when I take this terminal and touch any one side of the LEDs, it's going to light up either red or green. I'm going to turn the light out above me so that you guys can get a better look at that. So here's one side, red. Here's one side, green. That goes for all of the LEDs in this circuit. This one happens to be a single bulb, but same concept applies. Over here, same. And here's another single bulb there and there. So, with that being said, just remember that the buttons and the bulbs are two totally separate systems. The 12 volt that's going into the bulbs is completely separate from what the buttons are doing. So these negative leads here that are going to the LEDs, which I have to now solder on, those are going to go back to my tortoise. I'm going to use one of the single pole double throw switches on the tortoise to provide a negative feed going to these bulbs. So on the tortoise, you've got your input and two outputs. One of those outputs is going to go to this line. One of those outputs is going to that line. And then the input for that single pole double throw switch is going to go back to the negative of my 12 volt power system. That's basically here what I'm doing with showing you with the battery. Hope that explains it. Hope that answers anybody's questions. Now what I'm going to do is go through and solder all this together. Unfortunately, it's a whole bunch of solder or soldering. So I'm just going to fast forward this. This way I'm not wasting all of your time. And we'll take a look and see how it turns out. Okay, so I just realized that the wire that I'm using only has 8 wires in it. It's got 4 pair of colors. So those 4 colors take care of my 4 crossovers. But then I have these 2 down here that are single LEDs that are going to single turnouts that also needs wires. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I have some spare wire that I pulled out of another cable that I'm just going to, I guess, zip tie to this one so I know that it belongs to the LEDs, and just run them back to the tortoise it belongs to. Yeah, it's a little cheating, but it's what I got right now. Alright, now with all that said and done, it's time to test them. Again, we're going to do our positive lead on our battery to the positive bar, and this time, if we take the negative lead, we're going to touch it to the 4 sides of these wires and see if we get lights. And then we're going to touch it to these wires and see if we get lights there. I'm going to turn out the overheads so we can see.
Alright guys, I know that was a lot of fast forwarding. My next step from here is to now take that panel from the workbench, take it back to the train layout, put it on the deck, drill a hole, run the wires down so I can hook up the DC inputs to for the LEDs into the DC bus, and then connect all of those wires back to the tortoises and get the wires that I originally had hooked up for the switches back into the mini panel. I'm going to save that for a part 2. I thank you guys so much for hanging in there and watching this whole video. Again, I know it was long and know it was a lot of soldering. It was a pain in the butt for me. I crammed that hour and a half back down into 15 minutes, or at least tried to. So again guys, thanks. Appreciate you watching. Questions, comments, likes, subscribes, all appreciated. As always, rail riders, let's ride these rails together. See ya.